today's show, we're going to be covering a service center for Ukrainians opening in Poland, Ontario holding express entries for those in skilled trades, Canada focusing on vulnerable Afghans for World Press Freedom Day, Filipino communities in Canada, and Indian communities in Canada.
IRCC Minister Sean Fraser announced the opening of a new Canadian Information Centre in Warsaw, Poland. This centre is conveniently located in the Canadian Biometrics Operations Centre, or CBOC, and they are offering in-person services to Ukrainian applicants in Ukrainian, French, and English. This comes at a time when there is an increasing need for Ukrainian biometric appointments. There's also been a secondary and temporary center open in Berlin, Germany on May 4th, and this brings Canada's biometrics capacity in the European Union up to 6,600 appointments per day.
A total of over 1,000 candidates were nominated for permanent residency on April 26th. The Ontario Immigrant Nominee Program, or OINP, was the organization that issued these invitations. Notifications of interests, or NOIs, were also released on April 26th, as well as for candidates who have the Comprehensive Ranking System, or CRS, scores between 300 and 600. Express entry candidates who receive a nomination from Ontario will receive 600 CRS points added to their profile. For more information, be sure to visit the Ontario government's site on permanent residency.
May 3rd was World Press Freedom Day, and this is a day created by the UN General Assembly to promote and encourage freedom of information for the good of the public. The IRCC this year highlighted the Humanitarian Resettlement Program, which helps vulnerable people like Afghans and Afghan journalists. This program is a very special one, as Canada is one of the first countries to implement a program like this.
So isn't it interesting, Sarah, that we're talking about express entry for skilled trades, because I'm pretty sure we talked about this last week.
We did. I think I did a whole segment on the skilled trades federal program, because we talked about express entry having multiple different programs, but the only one that has been selected lately is provincial nominee. So Minister Sean Fraser had announced that the other pathways will be opening soon, and it looks like Ontario is already accepting people for skilled trades, which is great.
Mabuhay mga kababayan! My name is Adrian Quijano, and I'm proudly a second-generation Canadian from a Filipino family. Today we're going to be talking about the thriving Filipino community in Canada. According to the Embassy of the Philippines, which is based in Ottawa, there are over 800,000 Filipinos living in Canada today. About 40% of that population lives in Ontario, which is where I'm from. The Filipino population in Canada is based mostly in the following 4 provinces: Ontario, Alberta, British Columbia, and Manitoba. Did you know that in the period of 2011 to 2016, most Filipino immigrants actually moved to Alberta instead of Ontario, which was one of the first times in history? There are multiple benefits for immigrants of all places who are looking to move to Canada. Specifically, for those moving in the Philippines, here are some of the top reasons why most Filipinos choose to move here. Canada has a very strong Filipino community. According to the 2016 census, the Canadian Filipino population grew by 26% between 2011 and 2016. Canada's most recent census shows that there are over 840,000 Filipinos living in Canada today. There is also a thriving job market, especially for folks who are working in the skilled labor and trades community. As well, there is a very stable political system, as Canada is ranked in the top 5 of the Economist Intelligence Unit's World Democracy Index. Canada is also very safe and is considered one of the safest places to live in the world, ranking highly on the Berkshire Hathaway Travel 2022 report. Lastly, it has free healthcare. Canada offers free healthcare to the citizens and permanent residents of its provinces and territories. Each province and territory has its own health plan and offers coverage for different products and services. According to the Canadian Encyclopedia, there are over 1,000 Filipino community centers across Canada that is free for anyone to use. The following two are the biggest examples. The Filipino Center of Toronto. Their objectives are to promote the best of the Filipino community in the Greater Toronto Area. They strive to develop and foster the community spirit, as well as establish and maintain Filipino culture by providing educational, recreational, and employment networking services. The next one is the National Filipino Canadian Cultural Center, or NPC3. The NPC3 is a registered non-profit society that is based in British Columbia. In the spring of 2020, a team of graduate students came together and consulted with the Vancouver Filipino community to help build the organization. Their goal is to establish a nationally run Filipino Canadian Cultural Center. Their dream is to have a center that supports the social and cultural community for Filipinos in Canada.
The 2021 Annual Report to Parliament on Immigration shows that Indians make up the highest number of people who have received their permanent resident status in 2020. In fact, they make up 23% of permanent resident status receivers in that year. Indians have been and continue to come to Canada in large numbers. So where do they settle? What services and resources are available to them? And what kind of celebrations can they enjoy when they get here? Ontario and British Columbia have the highest number of Indian residents in the country, specifically Toronto and Vancouver. The very first South Asian men arrived in Canada in Vancouver, BC in 1903. In 1908, the very first Sikh Gurdwara was built in Vancouver, BC. In fact, this was the very first in all of North America. There's a long history here of South Asian people coming and continuing to celebrate and practice their heritage as well as integrate with the Canadian community, which is why a lot of these communities that are so old are still alive and thriving today. In 1908, the very first Sikh Gurdwara was built in Vancouver, BC. In fact, the very first in North America, not just Canada. There's a long history here of South Asian people coming to Canada and continuously celebrating their heritage while integrating with the Canadian community, which is why the communities are still thriving today. We'll first look into detail at Toronto. Toronto has many different services and centers available to people of Indian descent, and this includes the South Asian Women's Center. And the South Asian Women's Center offers settlement services including interpretation and translation, family counseling and support, crisis intervention, counseling, advocacy, and they can do all of these things in English, Bengali, Hindu, Urdu, Tamil, and many more languages. Festivals celebrated in Toronto include the Festival of South Asia, which is one of the largest North American South Asian street festivals, and also the Festival of India, and there are many, many more. What kind of religious resources are there in Toronto? There are many different gurdwaras and mandirs located in Toronto, and this includes the very famous BAPS Sri Swaminarayan Mandir in Toronto, which is an incredible piece of architecture. It took 1,800 craftsmen from India to hand carve the 24,000 pieces of stone, and they did so without using metal or concrete. It was assembled in 18 months by 400 volunteers. Toronto is not the only place in the area that has a lot of different Indian resources. In fact, the GTA, or Greater Toronto Area, has many different people who come from India and Pakistan and have similar religions and ethnic celebrations. This includes Scarborough, Mississauga, and Brampton, which is where I was born and raised. Next, we will look at Vancouver, British Columbia in detail. Vancouver also has many different community centers available for people of Indian descent, and this includes the Indian Cultural Association of Vancouver. This is a non-profit group for Indian professionals where they can network and form personal relationships. There's also a South Asian Women's Empowerment Program, which is for people who've been in the community a long time and newly arrived people. And this promotes mental health, self-care, and raising a healthy, happy family. There are lots of activities associated with this center, and that includes yoga and Bhangra. As for festivals and events, there is the Diwali Fest, which takes place in Vancouver and Surrey, and the Indian Summer Festival, which is put on by the Indian Summer Arts Society. This is a non-profit organization that hosts many different festivals throughout the year. As for religious resources, there are also many different temples beautifully constructed for Sikhs and Hindus in the region. As you probably already know, Canada is a very diverse place to live. But it's not just diverse. There are a lot of different smaller communities in the country of people who share an ethnic background and a religion, and in this way can keep their heritage going from the country that they came from while enjoying Canadian culture. And a great example of this are the many Indian communities that are here in Canada today.
So Sarah, did you ever grow up in a very multicultural area in Canada?
Yes, I think I consider myself pretty lucky because I grew up in Brampton, Ontario, which is very diverse, but there's a very large Indian community there specifically. And I grew up around, the languages and lots of different resources there for Indian people, lots of temples. In fact, the movie theater that I used to grow up going to, the concession stand menu was digital, and about every 30 seconds it would actually change to, I think it's Hindi, I'm not sure what language, but it was clearly an Indian origin language. So, and there's also just as many Bollywood movies as there are Hollywood movies in that movie theater. So it was pretty cool.
Mm-hmm. That is really cool. That's nice.
Yeah. It's nice to see that there's catering for people who make up most of a community. But how about you, Adrian? Did you grow up in a diverse place?
Honestly, no, not really. I grew up in Oakville, Ontario. So there was a pretty small pocket of folks of color in my community. So growing up Filipino there was definitely interesting. It wasn't until I grew up and I moved to Waterloo and I met more folks who were Filipino and more folks who were from all over the world that I really started to fully appreciate being a Filipino person in Canada. And it's just really nice to have been able to learn more about the Filipino community this week. Because I've been a Filipino in Canada since I was a baby, but I always am happy to learn more about what it's like to be Filipino here. So yeah.
That's great. Were you surprised by what you learned? Was anything surprising?
That's a good question. I guess the thing that was most surprising to me was how many Filipino cultural centers there are in Canada. I had assumed that there were only a couple hundred or so.
Oh my
I
gosh.
didn't really grow up seeing any. Yeah, I know. I didn't really grow up seeing any in any of the places that I grew up. Yeah, but there's actually a couple thousand around the country.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, and it is amazing because it's really nice to see that folks who are like me in all parts of Canada are being supported and have a community.
Right.
That's all for today. Thank you for joining us this week. Be sure to click the bell icon and subscribe to the MyConsultant.ca channel. For more information on the content we discussed, be sure to visit MyConsultant.ca to speak with an immigration and citizenship consultant. I'm Adrian Quijano.
And I'm Sarah Ostapchuk.
And we'll see you next week. Bye!
Bye, everyone.